Okay, it looks like our theme song is not working today. I'm not sure why that's happening, but we'll figure that out. Good morning, or afternoon, everybody. My name is Mr. Waldrop, and thank you for joining us today on this Pandemic Wednesday edition of the Wall Dropping History Channel. I'm so glad you could show up here today and participate in your education. As always, my name is Mr. Waldrop, and I'll be your host today. And with me, I have my co-host,
Elizabeth.
Okay, Elizabeth Waldrop, and she's going to be sitting in the shotgun seat, so to speak, here helping me out today, dealing with a unusually difficult to enunciate topic, and that is the history of Cocoliztli, right? Cocoliztli.
I say it right.
Okay, so yeah, you said it right. So the history of Cocoliztli. So what? Let's first of all let's go over the agenda real fast. Now the theme song wants to work. All right, let's go over the agenda real fast. So here is your agenda. Today, let's see. Today, of course, Pandemic Wednesday. If you want to go back and look at the earlier episodes this week, we had the history of civilization on Monday. Tuesday, we had the history of the Mongols. Today is Pandemic Wednesday. Tomorrow is bound labor. So that's supposed to be the lesson tomorrow. There is about a 25% chance that I may have to postpone Thursday's lesson. They just announced that if you want anything from the school, if you're a teacher, to come up there and get it on tomorrow. So I might need to make a pit stop up there, but it's only from 12 to 1. So, I'm sorry, not 12 to 1, 10 to 1. So I will let y'all know if I end up not making it. I'm going to try and get up there and be up there at 10 so I can be back at the house by 11ish. But just to pick up a few things. Anyways, and then, of course, Friday is Culture Day. So on Culture Day, what I like to do is have some viewer-submitted material to put on there. So if you are interested, some of y'all have been doing this and have done a great job. I mean, my mind has been blown by some of the talents y'all sent in. Send in your talents. I'm thinking of Friday making it kind of almost like a talent show, so to speak. So if you have a talent, send in your talents. It can be a image where you took some artwork. It could be maybe you're musically inclined, you record yourself singing, somebody dancing. Well, whatever it is you're good at, send in your talents. And to send those in, submit them to my email address at jwaldrop1@ebrschools.org. Okay, and so that is going to be coming up this Friday, so make sure you tune in for that episode. Okay, so without further ado, we're going to go ahead and get started here on this Pandemic Wednesday with Cocoliztli. So what exactly is Cocoliztli? So as we get going, I wanted to give the shout outs for those that have commented. Thank you for joining us, Quinn, Narali, Jayla. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Velasco and Bushra. Glad you could join us today. I'm so glad to have you here with us today. By the way, if you're not up to date with what is going on up at Broadmoor, they basically said that any of the work that you want to make up, I can do the grades for the makeup work. It cannot be more than a B. And all this work that we're doing is going to be bonus. So lots and lots of opportunity to earn a whole lot of bonus points. Oh, and thank you for joining us, Mr. Raby. Glad you could join us. Okay, so let's get going with Cocoliztli. So what exactly is Cocoliztli? Well, Cocoliztli originated from the Nahuatl word for pest. Now, this is the language spoken by the Aztecs. So this is a disease that is going to ravage Mexico, particularly in the region of the Aztec Empire, right? So this is kind of the Aztec killer, if you will.
Not like a ziggurat thingy.
No, that's an Aztec temple. Yeah. So it's their word for disease or illness or plague. Of course, there's a picture of me back when I was big and chunky in front of the Aztec pyramid. Now, there have been 12 epidemics that have all been kind of lumped together as this one epidemic of Cocoliztli. It is possible that they were different strains of the same thing. It is possible they were different diseases, that they all just got lumped in together. Keep in mind, we're dealing with very, very far back history. So, there's not 100% scientific conclusive stuff on this, right? but it's best believed that it was part of a strain of salmonella. Okay, so a strain of salmonella. It might have been an indigenous virus, that's possible, but the leading research says it is a strain of salmonella. And I wanted y'all to see this video here real fast.
Scientists find new lead in Cocoliztli mystery. Scientists have come one step closer to unlocking the secrets of a centuries-old
It was saying you couldn't hear. Somebody said they couldn't hear. Basically, in a nutshell, the latest experts have come to the conclusion that Cocoliztli was a strain of salmonella. I don't know. So, one of the things that can cause salmonella is extreme food poisoning. So the kind of question I ask is, have you ever gotten food poisoning or got sick from eating food? If so, what was it and what was it like? You ever think of a time y'all got sick from eating food?
I have gotten food poisoning before.
Yeah.
Like when we were at our old house in Baton Rouge, I ate something, I guess, and I threw up nonstop for like 24 hours.
I don't remember that.
I've never had food poisoning.
Yeah, you did. Yeah, because
Wait,
like
haven't?
I was in bed and you kept giving me Gatorade and stuff like that.
I don't think it was from food poisoning. No, I just think you
It was
had
from-
pneumonia or something like that.
No, it was from food poisoning.
Mm.
I wasn't coughing. I was throwing everything up. I couldn't hold anything down.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean you had food poisoning, was it? I know myself, I had it, first time was at Arby's here. Yeah, rabies. So what did you eat that gave you the illness? Just out of curiosity. Anyways, for me, it was going to Indonesia and eating. Let's see, potatoes, and now I refuse to eat them unless it's potato chips. Okay, fascinating. I know the big things that typically can cause it can be rice, noodles, meat that is sat out too long. I ate coconut jelly in Vietnam and got sick and threw up everything I ate that day. Ooh. Yeah, for me it was when I went to Indonesia and ate too much rice. It gave me a weird disease. Yeah, go ahead.
I've never had food poisoning.
Have you ever eaten something that just made you feel nauseous?
That honey bun.
The honey bun?
Yeah, the honey bun makes me feel nauseous.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Well, I guess not really.
Anyways, so our worst cases will occur in modern-day Mexico, and this is around the time of the Aztecs, and you can see the percentage of population decline based on this epidemic. I forgot it was something super old, though. I was a dumb kid. And Rachel says, I love coconuts. So, the first recorded case would happen in 1519. There would be at least 12 other documented outbreaks, right? Which is kind of warning of, these diseases coming back over and over and over. The last case would happen in 1813. Now, there is potential that could have been an outbreak before that wiped out the Mayans. It could have been another disease. We're not sure, right? But it's potential it could have been another disease that wiped out the Mayans. Okay, so my kind of question to you is, seeing that it wiped out the Aztecs, right? Like, if you go to Mexico City now, the Aztec culture is just gone. Absolutely gone. And then you saw how it wiped out the Mayans, or at least some disease did. We're all aware of how disease wiped out the Native Americans here in North America. My kind of question is, how concerned are you with this pandemic, or maybe another pandemic down the line, permanently damaging our country? And I think back to the diseases, whether you're talking about, they're saying that, what do you call it, AMC may never reopen again. That's one that they're real concerned about.
No, AMC.
Yeah, no more AMC. Well, they had just taken out $5 billion in debt because if you go to AMC, remember how they used to be those real crappity chairs? And they put those like recliners in, those soft cushiony recliners. They did that to all their AMCs. They built that AMC Prime Theater, and they put a bunch of AMC Primes and the Dolby Theaters and stuff like that. So they spent a lot of money, and then they unleashed that new AMC A-List. So they spent a lot of money that they were going to make back. They were starting to turn a profit off all this money they spent. But it was just a bad time. It's not like they made a bad decision. Sometimes you got to spend money to make money, right? And now all of a sudden it looks like they may be done. I don't know. Everybody's selling their stock. I mean, they're absolutely hemorrhaging. So AMC might be over with.
I don't want to move. I don't want to have to do all of our stuff at Movie Track.
You mean Movie Tavern?
Yeah, Movie Tavern.
Who knows?
I mean, Movie Tavern's a nice place, but
there's also that.
I like AMC better.
There's that Celebrity Theater. There's a couple other theaters.
Celebrity Theater?
Yeah, the one over there on Corsi. Yeah. Anyway, Cinemark, stuff like that.
Okay.
Yeah, and of course that's one that I can think of off the top of my tongue. But of course there's others too. I imagine a lot of local businesses, they're not going to be able to recover from this. Yeah, I love how Raby puts that. So he says, "I'm really concerned life will never be the way it was, and there will be a new normal." I can't imagine the next time. I was always taught when you meet another man, particularly in an interview, you shake their hand and give them a good firm handshake. I think the days of shaking hand might be over. We may have to adopt the Asian style of bowing to each other. But
that every day.
Yeah, we may have a new world. Businesses having to go bankrupt. Yeah, so it could be a huge concern. Huge concern. Not just us either, right? So, I mean, other countries are dealing with this too. All right, so Cocoliztli epidemics usually occurred within 2 years of a major drought. So that's another reason they link it to salmonella, is that they're having to keep food longer and eat it longer than it's really should have been eaten. There's also some questions of why it did not impact the Europeans that came there, right? So like right after the Europeans show up, all of a sudden all this disease starts happening, but it doesn't seem to even affect the Europeans that came, let alone back in Europe. So there's some reason why it's not affecting the Europeans. Because the damage of mom and pops and their other local businesses go through. Yes. Oh, absolutely. That is going to be huge. You just think about all the little businesses that just can't do business now. I have a friend of mine that ran a catering business. And my sister, she runs a catering business. And it's like, what are they supposed to do? Nobody's catering events right now. So huge. My kind of side job, I think I've shown or told some of y'all this. I dress up as comic book characters and stuff like that for kids' birthday parties. And it's hurting my pocketbook. I can't do any of that anymore. So yeah, it's crazy. Yeah, we might have to shake forearms. Yeah, we might have to. Yeah, do the elbow bump. Yeah, do the elbow bump. So, one possibility, this is one of the potential possibilities, is that Europeans had built up resistances to these diseases caused by food illness or maybe vermin and stuff like that, right? So, potentially, this is a strain of salmonella that was brought over by pests of some kind, whether it's rats, rodents, stuff like that. And the Spanish just had no immunity to it, right? When I learned about it, I always learned, well, it's the smallpox that wiped out the Latin world. And it turns out, no, it was really this thing, whatever this thing was. But a lot of people think that it might have had been a resistance. So why do you think it impacted the natives so much more than the Europeans?
Maybe because they had seen it, the Europeans had seen it before, so they had put up immunity to it. And the natives had never seen a disease like this before.
Well, I think another potential issue could be, of course, we don't know. This is just guess. I don't think the disease was racist. But, it could also be maybe that, Europeans had kind of learned over time the dangers of eating bad food, and the natives had never had to learn that. So it could have been something like that. We're about to get into some other potential reasons why. But I'm kind of curious, what y'all think? Why do you think this disease affected the natives so much more than Europeans? Any other thoughts? All right. So disease and death would often follow wherever the Spanish traveled, right? So Spanish comes to an area, and all of a sudden, just death came with it, right? So amongst the natives, there started being something known as the Black Legend, right? So it was almost seen as like white Europeans were seen as almost like they were the plague. You know, wherever they came, you better get out of Dodge because death is coming right behind them. And you can definitely see a lot of truth to that, right? You can see pictures of them hanging up the dead to try and get them out of town. So wherever the natives went, or wherever the Europeans went, death just came with them. So my question is, do you think the reputation for Europeans was well-deserved?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, was it their fault, though? Did you think the Europeans were active participants in killing off the Native Americans, or it's just a side effect of their presence?
It's just a side effect of their presence.
Makes sense? All right. Well, we'll look and see what y'all think. So some of the things that may have made the diseases worse was the harsh living conditions that soon came as the Spanish would begin to conquer an area. And let's go ahead and look at some of those conditions. Well, you got to realize at the core of this living conditions they were put in was their desire to have them convert to Christianity. So they'd often put them in these like little camps, close quarters. Of course, that spreads disease worse. Poor food, poor sleeping, stuff like that. All the things that hurt your ability to fight off disease and makes disease more prevalent. They're going to now start living in these conditions. You know, no longer big open woods. It's small, compact little areas. And in doing so, it would massively spread the disease, right? Particularly as they're feeding them food. I'm sure they're not getting the best of the food either. So what are some poor living conditions you could imagine them having to deal with? And, you know, you don't even have to think back to Native Americans. What are some conditions people here in America live in that you think promotes disease? What do you think, Elizabeth?
I guess really close living quarters.
Close living quarters, right? If you're all crammed together in an apartment complex instead of a big spread out neighborhood, it's definitely easier for disease. Anything else you can think of? What about sanitation? You know, access to cleaning supplies, access to running water. You know, I mean, you got to clean the toilets and the bathtubs. You know, stuff like that. Anything else you can think of? Maybe dietary. You know, poor hygiene. That's a good one. I always think about that poor dietary thing too. You know, if you go in the fridge and you're like, I don't know if I should eat that, we'll just throw it out. If you're really poor, you ain't throwing that food out. So that could be an issue too. You know, one of the things they talk about here is COVID-19. A big part of that is them eating bats, which, you know, that's not exactly the most hygienic food source, is eating bats. All right, in this church camps, this food is poor and the sanitation was low. Vermin would often be a huge issue, right? So if they're out in the woods, they didn't have to worry about rats crawling around when they're sleeping. And this would also spread disease, right? And the kind of question I had, and I thought you'd get a chuckle out of this one. Do you have any fear of spiders, snakes, rats, mice, some other pest? What do you think, Elizabeth? And by the way, I think Quinn is right. Poor dietary, hygiene, all that. So what about you, Elizabeth? Spiders.
Snakes, I'm not really scared
Not afraid of snakes.
Rats, I don't like them. But, like, if you drop, like, a mouse on me or, like, a rat on me,
You'd freak out?
I would probably freak out, but I wouldn't, like, scream and run away and, like, start crying like I would if you dropped a spider on me.
Jack drop a spider on you?
No, you can't.
You gotta overcome your fears.
No.
You got a big old tarantula.
I don't care. I don't care. Like, you saw, like, whenever we went on that canoe trip, that giant spider
Oh,
was
yeah,
like
we
this
almost jumped the
big,
canoe.
it drops in our canoe.
Yeah, I remember that.
I screamed. I almost jumped out of that boat too. You had to like hold me back while getting the spider out. To stop
Riley
me
said she's
from,
held a
like,
snake. So when I was 16, 17, I had a pet snake. And I had to breed mice to feed the mice to the snake. Yeah, so it had something to eat. And then the snake got loose one time.
Oops.
And the first time it got loose and Grandma found the snake, that was the end of having a pet snake.
Hello?
Yeah, Ravi says he doesn't have a strong fear of them, but he doesn't like those things at all. Yeah, I'm kind of curious what y'all
But I
thought.
don't like bugs in general. Like, I don't do.
Okay, so the
bugs.
Spanish would also implement something called the Encomienda system. And this is a labor system where the natives were turned into slaves, basically. Let's see, Quinn says, I have a fear of all insects, especially cockroaches. Yeah, I don't like cockroaches. They're pretty nasty.
Cockroaches.
The payment for their slave, so they didn't call it slavery. What they basically said is, look, you're going to go basically work on our land for free. We'll feed you. It's just like slavery, right? They'd even beat these natives too. But they said, oh, but we're giving you payment, and your payment is we're going to protect you. I don't know how much protecting they did, considering it wiped out most of them. And they were going to teach them Christianity. So that was the payment for their labor, right? So this is the Encomienda system. Let's see. This says, I'm scared of spiders, rats, stinging caterpillars, and many more.
Wait, there are stinging caterpillars?
Yeah. Now, to maintain this system of labor, the Spanish created something called the Hacienda system. This is basically slave plantations, right? I mean, if you think about what you've read about in old-timey slave plantations in the South, very much like this, right? So think of these as Spanish slave plantations. Of course, you can see they're not picking cotton, but they're still farming the land, so to speak. And the kind of question I have is, do you think this was a precursor for slavery here in the U.S.? You know, do you think this was something they just built on, or they just kind of both came to the same conclusion of how to deal with slave labor? What do you think? So this is basically slavery in Latin world. But you got people that are working on farms. They don't have a say in it. The people that are running these farms would often beat them. You know, so it's very much like a slave living in the South, right? And they lived on plantations, only they called them haciendas. And so my kind of question is, do you think that they kind of built this model for the Native Americans, or do you think they just both came to the same conclusion on how to deal with slavery? What do you think?
I think they built it.
They just built on it?
Yeah.
Okay, so whenever you learn about what happened to the natives, right, the Aztecs in particular, it was always the same myth, okay? Oh, the Spanish came to Indonesia and enslaved them as well. Yeah, that doesn't shock me. Now, slavery dates back to the Egyptians way back when. That's right. Yeah, they definitely saw it as an opportunity to make profit. So it is always driven due to an additional myth that they brought civilization to the Latin world. Both are not true. Okay, this idea that they conquered the Aztec Empire, or that they conquered the Aztec Empire through the use of their advanced civilization, right? So I want you to get a taste of this advanced civilization, right? So this is the Aztecs' unadvanced civilization versus the advanced European weaponry, right? So let's take a look at the two. So this is the type of weapon that the Spanish would have used.
The British.
This is an example of the world record holder for firing a musket, and I want you to see him in action. Oops. He's the record holder. Just one shot. Notice he ain't even looking where he aims, too. There's no point. It's so inaccurate. Okay. This is what the Aztecs were working with. Keep in mind, all those arrows and spears getting chunked are just two people. Rachel asked, why do they need to poke it? To pack the ball, the musket down with the gunpowder. Okay, you get the idea. I don't want to get too graphic. It gets pretty graphic here real fast. So the two weapons, which one would you prefer? If you had to choose, would you want the one where the world record holder could fire off 3 shots in 45 seconds, and it's not accurate, and it does not shoot very far? Or would you rather have that bow and arrow?
The bow and arrow.
Yeah, I mean, it's without a doubt, right? So, in fact, you could really easily make the argument that the gun was not the weapon of choice during this era. It's not going to be until you have semi-automatic weapons. You know, now you pick up a pistol and it's firing much faster. Yeah, but I mean, in that era, it probably was not the best weapon to use. You'd probably been better off with a bow and arrow. Yeah, bow and arrow. Or even a spear. Heck, I'd rather chuck a spear. You know? Yeah, I'll have to see if my dad can loan us his bow and arrow. We can maybe go out and do some target practice with it. Yeah, so everybody's saying a bow and arrow, right? So let's bury the myth that it was advanced civilization that killed the Aztecs, right? And thank you for joining us, Demarian. Glad you could join us today. So let's kill that myth. It was not the advanced weaponry of the Aztecs, right? I mean the Spanish. Okay, so what does conquer the Spanish? What did conquer? Well, the Spanish were conquered using smaller cities to defeat larger cities. I'm not really going to get into it too big, but just basically understand that the smaller cities were getting sick of providing human sacrifices for the big cities. So what they thought was, well, maybe if we help the Spanish conquer the big city, then all of a sudden the human sacrifices will go away. And they did, right? I mean, the Spanish aren't performing human sacrifices. Now, they are killing them in mass due to disease and slavery, but they're not doing human sacrifices anymore. So it's one of those, the smaller cities kind of destroyed the bigger cities, right? So that's the first thing that caused the fall of the Aztecs. The second thing would be they would also spread European diseases, right? So in addition to just the Cocoliztli, they obviously did deliberately spread smallpox too. So those are the things that wipe out the Aztecs, not the advanced Europeans and their advanced civilization, right? Those two things. So why do you think these smaller cities were willing to turn on the larger cities? Why do you think that was?
Because they were killing all their people?
Yeah, they're bringing them in for human sacrifice. That has an especially big mental stigma to it as well. You know, seeing that. You know, I think there's always a thing too of like nobody wants to be told what to do. And they looked at these big cities as being very oppressive. You know, we see people right now trying to protest to be able to go out during COVID-19. Oh, yeah, sorry. Rachel, I'll be honest. I turned the sound off so I could fuss at Joe to get Toby to stop barking. So, yeah, that was me doing that deliberately. So my curious is, why do you think the smaller cities turned on the larger cities? So what was the symptoms that came up with that? Yeah, they're fed up with the big Aztecs. Now, most of our knowledge of disease comes from art and documentation, and most of it comes from one outbreak in 1576. Okay, and that's when it was heavily recorded by local scientists, or what accounted for scientists at the time. This was not the worst outbreak of the 12 cases, but it was the most documented, and that was the one in 1576. Symptoms include high fevers, severe backache, vertigo, that's when you basically get really dizzy. Your tongue would turn black. Your urine would turn very dark. Dysentery, right? Basically diarrhea. Severe abdominal and chest pain. You would get head and neck nodules, which are like little bumps. You would develop neurological disorders. You get jaundice, which is where your body starts to turn yellow because you can't get rid of all the urethric acid. You would begin to have profuse bleeding from your nose, eyes, and mouth. All of that. That would happen for about 3 to 4 days before death would set in. So, what symptoms scared you the most and why?
All of it.
And Demarion says, because they were tired of the Aztecs sacrificing their people. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, vertigo is when you feel the room is spinning. That's right. And Quinn says they bring on the human sacrifices. Yeah, it's scary looking. You know, to have people gather and watch people cut their hearts out. So anyway, what symptoms of those scared you the most and why? And I'll go back to that list. Which of these symptoms scared you the most?
The last one, because I'm afraid of blood.
Bleeding through your nose, eyes, and mouth.
Don't say
Yeah. And this is how they treat them. They'd wrap them up and, all this stuff to try and help them. You have the blood coming out. Me personally, and of course it's all terrible, right? Nobody wants any of that stuff. But I think for me the worst one would be the neurological disorders. Not having full control of your physical faculties. That would scare me.
I'm afraid of blood, so yeah.
Oh yeah, a lot of background noises. Yeah, unfortunately. Okay, in most accounts of the natives, the Spanish would write off their civilization. Would write of these civilizations, right? So it would follow this pattern, and I wanted to get this pattern going for you. So the Spanish would show up, and they would talk about all these native civilizations, right? Whether it's the Aztecs, Mayans, Incas, whoever, right? But when future explorers would return, they were constantly puzzled. Where are all these natives? Where did they go? Right? Entire cities are abandoned. Areas where it was reported where there was heavy native populations, they'd show back up, and all you could find is the stuff that was left behind. And of course, it created this huge puzzle. Like, well, we can see where these people used to be, and we can read about where they used to be, but we can't find them. They would write about, like, oh, this city had 200,000 people living in it. And they'd show up and they're like, ain't anybody here. Where'd they all go? So most explorers would assume a couple of things. One would be that possibly earlier explorers had exaggerated, right? They'd said it was 200,000 people and really it was like 400 people, right? They're just exaggerating it to make it sound better. Others believe that, well, maybe they showed up and they killed all the natives, right? Just trying to steal all their gold, right? Because that was the myth, right? That all the Aztecs and all these people were sitting on gold, and the Spanish would show up and they'd just kill them for their gold, which they didn't have, by the way. And then the last one is that there was this belief that they were all nomads, and maybe they just moved on, right? Kind of like birds flying south for the winter. The reality of it is the Aztecs were not nomads, right? The main capital area where they had these giant pyramids, they were not moving those pyramids around. So black tongues. Yeah, that's. Can you imagine waking up and seeing your tongue turn black? So, the kind of question I have is, why were the natives looking for native civilizations? Why do you think they wanted native civilizations? Why do they even care? Why not avoid them? If you're just exploring, looking for stuff, why do you think they were looking for natives? What do you think?
I don't know. They wanted more slaves?
Well, I don't think they understood the concept that these slaves didn't appreciate gold. So I think they were looking for the slaves to help them figure out where to get the gold. They were looking for other resources. And I want to go back to that earlier slide too. Remember, what is it they said that they were there for to do to the natives? They didn't say it was to enslave them for labor. What did they say they were there for?
Turn them into Christians?
Yes, conversion to Christianity. So they're seeking out these savages, as they put it, to try to convert them into Christianity. So all of those, they're all working together at the same time. They want the riches, they want the gold, they want that slave labor, they're looking to convert them to Christianity. The plus two, they already have infrastructure, right? You don't have to build a village, you can just show up and take their village. So that plays an element too. Plus, they got to figure out how to survive. So that all works together. Yeah, it's all working together. Now, the true count of the death from Cocoliztli is hard to establish because we're not sure when it first started, right? We believe it started around 1545. So I know that whenever I learned about the Spanish conquest, you always heard that disease really wiped them out. Well, first you heard that Spanish technology did, and then it was disease. The reality of it is, it was not smallpox, although that did kill a lot of people. It killed about 8 million of them. Yeah, they wanted more slaves and convert them into their religion, and to attempt to convert their religion. That's right. Oh, that's right. Now, the worst two plagues that we know of, and of course we don't have accurate information. Go back to that thing I told you about the historian's perspective, right? That we're never really sure the farther we go back in history how much of it is accurate and how much of it is best guesswork. But anyway, it's estimated that in the first major outbreak, it's going to be between 12 and 15 million people dead. Okay, 12 and 15 million people. The second massive outbreak in 76 is going to be over 2 million of them that die. And of course, you can see the chart of how it kills the natives. So why do you think the story has always been that Europeans conquered the natives because of superior technology? And I think when it was all said and done, like 80% of them were killed from disease. Right? The other 20% were mostly wiped out from just the Spanish enslavement, but 80% of them were killed from disease of the Aztecs. So why do you think it was history is rewritten so that it was actually the Europeans' superior technology? What do you think? Elizabeth. Why do you think they would?
Because of racism?
I think there's an element of that, right? Of course, keep in mind, they're trying to push this narrative, right? And what's the narrative about the natives? How do they describe the natives?
They wanted to be.
Well, what do they call the natives? They didn't call them the Aztecs. What do they call them?
Indians or something? Or
Not the Indians.
Americans? Not
the Native Americans. These are just down to Aztecs. They called them the savages, right? It kind of goes to that manifest destiny idea, right? And I love how Demary said, and so with Jayla, and Raby too, they want to be seen as superior, right? Like they're coming to this savage world and bringing white superiority, right? It perpetuates this myth of white man's burden, right? That white man was given this blessing of superior intelligence, superior civilization. It was their responsibility to bring it these poor, dumb savages, right? So it all kind of fits together in that kind of stereotype, that myth that all works together. Yeah, and I love how Rachel put it too. And there's also the aspect too of the winner of the war is the one that writes the stories, right? To the victor goes the spoil. Spoils, I mean. Yeah, so it's you're all right? So it's all kind of perpetuating the myth of white superiority, helping out these poor savages. And I kind of want to go back to this picture right here. Let's see if I can find it here. Okay, oh yeah, here it is. Does that look like savages? I mean, here let me show just the remains of it. See if I can pull up a good image of it. Open image in new tab. Yeah, look at that. Does that look like savages? Or inferior culture? You know, I mean, they had a political system, they had a capital, they had smaller governments, they had food and trade, they built giant structures. Yeah, here's another one. Yeah, here's another one. You know, there's nothing savage about that. Oh, I think y'all have all probably seen the Aztec calendar. Let's see. An image in new tab. Yeah, they had a functional calendar that was a 365-day calendar. So they knew math and science. Let's see. Trying to show you they were also painted really vibrant and had really vibrant artwork. See if I can show it to you. Oh, they had their own games. Let me show you. Let me just see if I can show you what it looked like. Yeah, they had their own sport. I forgot what it was called, and I actually have a picture of me standing next to it, where they would kind of like, it was kind of like almost like rugby and basketball. And the goal of it was to fight each other for this ball, and the goal was to run up the side of this thing and throw the ball through the hole. Right? But it was like this weird rugby game that they would play. Let's see if I can figure out what it's called. No, it doesn't say. But yeah, so they had their own sports.
Pocatoke.
Pocatoke? Where'd you see that?
And there.
Oh yeah, Pocatoke. Yeah, Pocatoke. Yeah, so they had their own games. They had their own religion. Of course, it did include human sacrifice. But they had their own religion. They had their own culture, customs, all that stuff, right? So it definitely dispels this myth of them being absolute savages and that they couldn't do anything for themselves. So anyway, so I know this episode was about this pandemic being a pandemic Wednesday, but I also wanted to make sure I incorporated in that aspect to it too, to kind of incorporate in, dispel that myth, and you still see that today, right? The myth of like these dumb Mexican savages, all they can do is hard labor. It's a myth, right? That if you go to parts of Mexico City, compared to Baton Rouge, you'd think you stepped foot 20 years in the future as far as infrastructure. So, you know, I kind of always want to dispel that myth of the savagery that, you know, that kind of existed even to this day. So that's going to do it for this Pandemic Wednesday. It was kind of a shorter one, went a little bit faster today. This pandemic episode of Wall Dropping History. If y'all have any questions, feel free to leave those in the comments. Be sure to send in those talents. I'm going to try and put the lesson together tomorrow for the Friday one, and I want to make sure I get all those talents in there. Some of y'all have done a really good job of putting in those talents. So unless y'all have any questions or comments, you have any questions, Elizabeth? No? All right. So unless you have any questions or comments, that's going to do it for this episode of Wall Dropping History. Thank you, as always, for dedicating your afternoon to your education.
No,
I appreciate it.
Wrong. Thank you for your dedication to education.
Yeah, your dedication to your education.
Yes.
My little sign off.
Yes.
And until next time.